welcome to another episode of Curiosity's Sake. I honestly didn't expect an hour-long episode to need a follow-up, but yeah, there's another edition of Revolution 60. Thankfully though, it's not got much difference from the original, so I don't have to go through everything again. I mean, I had to play the game again, but I don't have to take everyone through it. Now, this game cost about £5, and right off the bat, I'm gonna be honest, I don't really think it was worth the £5. I feel like I only got like £2.50 per new piece of content added in the game. So, not really worth much. Anyway, the objective of this was to give Amelia some more character development and explore her involvement in the N3N3. It supposedly also explains how Crimson 9 was freed on N313. Brianna Wu felt that the main core principle of choice was kind of undermined because they don't really explain much about Amelia's involvement with the platform. So she wanted to add all these cut scenes in to make sure that we could fully understand what was going on. I personally agree with this sentiment, but I'm pretty sure these scenes could have been re-added in a patch for free. Like, I know that man hours were necessary and other things, but I've seen bigger content drops in games that didn't require us to pay £5 more. Apparently, a lot of people who played the original sided with Amelia outright and felt that Minuet was the villain. These scenes apparently add context as to who Amelia is and why the space station went off course, and it will also make it a bit more morally grey. I personally found it was already morally grey, but I definitely see what they were going for. Amelia definitely does seem like the lesser of two evils, so I'm kind of glad that they did bog her down a bit to try and make them both seem as bad as each other. It's not a bad way to do a spy thriller, admittedly. This is the Revolution 60 you were meant to play. You just had to pay £5 more for it. To be fair, there is one other thing that they offer, but I'll get to that in a bit. So the first scene that they added was where you get to interrogate a geisha. Not much really comes of it. It just sort of has like a seizure and then it runs away. But it does say something kind of ominous, which does point to a few clues as to what's going on later on down the line. The second scene that I found that played out very differently was that there was a malfunctioning geisha in one of the rooms. Originally it just sort of seizured when you clicked on it, but in this version it actually comes to life and says a few phrases. And if you keep poking it, it actually leans back and plays a recording of Amelia telling someone that she's not happy with the way that the AI is being programmed. And apparently there's too much junk data inside its head. Again, it's not a mind-blowing scene, but it does add a bit more to the game, I guess. But really, the third scene is, in my opinion, the best that this DLC has to offer, where Crimson 9 is actually interrogating Amelia and they actually interact one-to-one. In the original game, these two never have dialogue together, so it's interesting to see how they respond to each other, and they actually mention their own histories. And they do actually talk about what Amelia did and how she was created. And Amelia also says that this AI has always been defective and that she's prone to paranoia very quickly. The AI, on the other hand, believes that Amelia basically created her just to torture her by making bad things happen every time she had a negative thought. Again, it does really grey Amelia up, and I do appreciate this. And I also kind of appreciate the way that the AI kind of has a sympathetic angle. It's not just that she's bored anymore, she legitimately was tortured out of having any form of free will. And her line about having to take freedom makes a lot more sense in this one. Not that it didn't make sense before, but now you kind of understand her motive. Those, unfortunately, are the only 3 scenes in this entire thing that I noticed in this re-release, and in all honesty, I do not think it was worth £5. Now, there is one feature, admittedly, that they added, which is kind of cool, where you actually get to choose one of the 24 endings and watch just the cutscene without playing through the game again. So you get to see all the possible endings without having to play through the entire game, which I do appreciate because, honestly, you'd need to play this game for oh, Jesus Christ knows how many hours to get all these endings properly. And admittedly, some of them are a lot harder to do than others. So, yeah, in my opinion, I really like this, and I wish more choice games gave you this choice. But admittedly, having to pay £5 for this, on top of everything else, I don't feel like there's £5 worth of content. Honestly, I don't think there's enough content here to justify charging anything. It's not the worst thing I've seen when it comes to DLC. I mean, I've paid more for less when it comes to DLC, but admittedly, in my view, if I was releasing this game, unless there's like a real good reason for it, I personally wouldn't have charged money for this. Anyway, I wanted to also talk about my interaction with Brianna Wu, because I actually emailed the company that made this game and reached out to Brianna Wu on Twitter wanting to know more about that original script that didn't have Crimson 9 in it. I was actually kind of interested as to how it would play out. Ideally, if they had the original script, I would have loved to have seen it, but I didn't really have my hopes up because that document must be like, what, 10 years old at least? So, Brianna Wu said that basically we were writing the scripts as we went, which is why the story is so uneven. Admittedly, that was one of my guesses as to why some things seemed a bit stilted. Like, some things seemed like they were written at different points, and the writing seemed to get stronger the further you got into the game, which is what happens a lot when you're doing it as you go because you don't really go back and fix things like you should. We had no idea what we could get Unreal Mobile to do. No one had ever gotten it to run the level of animation that we're doing. Look at the Mass Effect mobile game that came out the same time ours did. There is barely any facial animation. We have over 75 bones running, which took fuck tons of work. Yeah, I do have to admit, like, the amount of facial detail in this game is actually quite impressive. Like, the aesthetic of this as a mobile game is... I know that the mobile version didn't quite look as polished, but it still looks pretty damn good for a mobile game. And the idea that they had that much detail in the game is something that I can be somewhat impressed by. So, as we figured it out, we figured we could tell a real story with a real villain. Around that time, I met someone at a convention who knew Amanda Wynne Lee. I had been a massive fan for years, and to my shock, she said yes to working with us. So I rewrote the entire script to centre around her character. I know she's best known for Yukiko, that's Yukiko Imagi I think she's called from Persona 4, but I'd always felt her best work was sarcastic and angry. She actually rewrote many of the best lines for that character. Sorry for such a long-winded answer, but there it is. Well, I'm actually very appreciative to have an answer at all. I honestly think this and Lucky Lualawa were the only two people who have ever actually responded. Yash Future Tech were too big to waste their time on the likes of me. But no, I actually really appreciated this answer. It cleared a few things up, and I actually find that it makes a lot of sense that they kind of weren't expecting to have such a deep narrative, and then not only did they find someone willing to help them achieve that, but also help them like create it as best they could using the voice talent along with the writing, because I think that's a great way of doing it. When you look at Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight, apparently he worked very closely with the director and the writers to make like the best possible version of his character, and they did that with the Doctor Who. Eccleston and Tennant both sat down with Russell T Davies and hashed out what kind of Doctor they'd be able to play. And I feel like the weaker Doctors, like Whittaker and in some cases Capaldi, didn't get this chance, and I think that's why it didn't work out as well for those guys. Capaldi admittedly said that he just didn't know a lot of the time what he was expected to do, and it kind of made him feel uneasy throughout the whole thing, which is a bit sad because he loved the part but he just didn't know what else to do. But yeah, I do think that having some writers on the team probably, in fact no, it would have definitely have helped, especially in those early days when nobody knew what they were doing. But I can kind of understand why it would be that way, even with people who've written before, because you do, when you approach something new, you do kind of get overwhelmed as to how to approach it. I know I was that way when I first wrote a novel. I never written a novel where I wrote all the chapters at the same time and then published it as a full thing. So I felt it was really ploddy and had to rewrite the thing multiple times. There are multiple novels I've just binned because they're just written horribly because of how I basically structured them. So I totally get that. I think the biggest flaw with the game is the uneven storytelling. We'd built a set and I'd write a scene to work with it. It all kind of works, but it kind of doesn't. Which, again, I did kind of say this before with the whole stilted thing, and I feel like they tried to do it the Uncharted way, which works for Uncharted because they don't care that much about the story, but this is quite narrative focused. So I think they did care enough about the story where it actually kind of undermined it. But I feel like they saved it a fair bit if they got such a comprehensive narrative out of things. Again, though, there are a lot of things that don't fully make sense in the game, which I kind of highlighted. I didn't do much else but highlight. I was quite negative. But yeah, with a few rewrites, I think this game probably would have been a lot stronger as far as the writing went. The other flaw was all the features that we had to cut. I wanted to have you collecting parts for Holiday's Needler, but we just didn't have time. There's not enough depth to the combat, which I did say actually. Admittedly, Girlfriend difficulty, which I thought I played Girlfriend originally, apparently I didn't. I'm a big liar pants, because I think I even said it in the review and then didn't realise until after I'd gotten really far into the editing process that I hadn't played it on... I thought I played it on the hardest. I played it on the easiest. So I played it on the hardest. And the hardest difficulty is actually a lot better. The combat's a lot more interesting because it's a lot more difficult. But even then, it's kind of still not the best. I feel like upgrading weapons might have helped a little bit, but maybe some more tactical gameplay would have been more useful. Because the enemies actually have more potential for attack than you do. Like, they can attack in diagonals, they can do all kinds of area of effect things, and you can just shoot forward or throw grenade, which does like 4 square damage, but you can only do that on certain builds. Again, builds would also be really good, but again, they don't have that, so it's just kind of up in the air. So she finished by saying that the lighting was something that we had to flat out sacrifice for animation. It kills me, it's so uneven and flat, but we just couldn't get it to run on iOS 7 any other way, because we lost so much RAM. I do kind of appreciate that. You probably do have to decide what you want more, whether it be the lighting or whatever. Admittedly, the lighting is very flat, but I do like some of the lighting effects. Like, there's one scene where Crimson '09 turns around and she actually has a pretty cool effect on her from where the light's coming from behind her. It was one of the criticisms, but I do understand it, especially in the mobile port. But admittedly, I do get that only so much can be done graphically with some games, in some engines, in some circumstances. So, as regrettable as it is that there wasn't lighting, I honestly feel that the animation was a worthy sacrifice, because for the most part the animation's not too bad. Like, there's a fair bit of decent animation in this. Facial animation's pretty good for what they can do with those characters, and the actual actions of the characters are also they're well done, and I appreciate the effort that went into those. So I'm kind of glad that the animations got to stay, and hopefully they might get the source code and update the lighting. I'd appreciate that, but I could understand if they didn't. So yeah, that's all I've got on Revolution 60. I was hoping to get the art book, but the art book doesn't exist anymore. I think it's out of print. So as far as Revolution 60 goes, that's kind of the end of the line, probably forever. I don't know if they're ever going to make another one. I doubt it. But yeah, I just wanted to finish by thanking Brianna Wu for answering the questions that I had. Otherwise, this would have been a hell of a short video. I am sorry for the impromptu nature of this one. Admittedly, I'm just so exhausted. I'm just running out of time before I have to go back to work, and I know I'm not going to finish anything whilst I'm at work. So I just wanted to do all this as quickly as possible, and also just be free in 2022, you know, not have any baggage, not having any dead weight from 2021 holding me down. So I just kind of wanted to finish all the Revolution 60 stuff. So episode 68, I believe it will be, can be a whole new project and I won't have to look back. So thank God for that. I can't wait until 2022, and I'm honestly hoping to do more than 4 episodes this year. Technically it's 5, because I actually did almost everything before midnight in 2021, on the last day of 2021. So kind of like Dead or Alive 5's video, I count this as a 2021 video. This is going to date the hell out of the video, because I doubt anyone gives a shit. But, well, you know. So yeah, join me next time when I do something. I don't know what game it'll be, and I love that.
You don't seem like any AI I've ever worked with. You're more frenetic.
Frenetic how? Wow, you've got some nice hardware. Sort of 60s sci-fi, which is great with the little bug thing you've got going on.
Yeah, like that.